resources, how a bill becomes a law, I think was my, Google search.
Uh, what's the story there? I didn't really look into why it takes time for these things to get sort of published, but do they have to?
Hang on, I got to mute myself here. All right, good. All right, very cool. I'll show you what I just identified this little bit of text at the bottom here is what I found. And I don't know, I'd be curious to hear kind of what the concern was from the faculty person you were talking to, if that's something that you can share.
Yeah, well, it wasn't really, they weren't concerned. I was just concerned and a little bit surprised because I was looking at bills that were like a month old or so at this point. So the 2-day thing obviously isn't always the case. I guess it's that delays can occur when there's a large number of bills. I was thinking that maybe the debt ceiling thing might have had something to do with it, though I don't really understand why that would arrange into things.
So you're talking months before you've seen the text.
At least 1 month. Yeah.
Interesting. All right, let's well, we've got a few minutes here, so but I pushed us through to YouTube Live, and so folks can. So we're technically, for our tens of listeners, we should introduce ourselves. This is the Gray Paper podcast. Each week we answer the question, what was the most interesting legal research question of the week? Karen Westwood is on a well-deserved vacation this week, so we're joined by Andrew Martineau. Andrew, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do for a living?
Sure. Yep, I'm a librarian at the University of Minnesota Law School. I do a lot of reference work. I'm also the instructional services librarian, so I participate in the 1L legal research and writing program, and then teach a upper division research class. So yeah, I spend a fair amount of time on the reference desk, and then teach a little bit.
Very cool. That's how long have you been at the University of Minnesota?
Oh, good question. I think I started in 2017, so about six years at this point. Yeah, it went by fast.
Yeah. Are you are your students just delivering ChatGPT memos for you at this point, or?
No, thankfully, yeah, all the cases that they cite are real cases, as far as I can tell. But we did cover ChatGPT a little bit this semester, which was kind of nerve-wracking because it was my first time really teaching. Well, of course, it was my first time teaching that topic because it was brand new. And it seemed like, the sort of consensus about the technology when you're reading, takes on, blogs and social media, it seemed to always be kind of shifting throughout the semester. So we didn't actually cover it till the very end. And at that point, I feel like things had kind of settled down and people had kind of gotten their heads around, what the technology was and what it could do, and probably most importantly, what it couldn't do.
Right.
So the way we integrated it is I always have the students break into small groups and then assess some newer research technology. And so they take a look at things like brief analyzers, case text, parallel search, stuff like that. And so I just had one of the groups look at ChatGPT and was really happy that I was kind of worried that they would kind of overestimate what it could do and not really take into account the limitations, but their takes were actually just spot on when it came to what I thought would be best practices. So it was kind of
the universe, you mentioned case text, so Kara, very cool tool. That's I'm not sure, there's quite a bit of overlap there with their new co-counsel resource. Is that something, do you have access to co-counsel at the university? Is that something the students can test out?
Oh, we have access to case text and Kara, but in parallel search, but not co-counsel yet. I signed up for a trial, but I don't think that they have been letting people in quite yet. So hopefully next semester we can do that. Ideally, we would have had one group maybe look at ChatGPT just sort of as a standalone, free-floating sort of chatbot type thing, and then compare that to something like CoCounsel. Next semester, we might have access to the Lexis sort of integration GPT. So that'd be another good sort of point of comparison.
Yeah, very nice. Or Thomson if they acquire.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I actually didn't hear about that until you pointed that out to me. I was hoping to hear kind of your take on that. Or
there is. I wonder if I've got the. I should have been prepared. Should have brought up my. So Joe Patrice, I didn't know about it either. I missed it on Joe Patrice from Above the Law posted an article on Casetext. A lot of people talking about acquisitions, and his theory is that Thomson Reuters, not totally unfounded, based on the article, it seems to make sense. Thomson saying they're going to invest, $100 million in legal AI, and that looks like probably an acquisition of Casetext. I hadn't heard about it either. Bob Ambrogi does a legal tech roundtable every Friday afternoon, and I happened to catch it on that program. I recommend that. That's kind of a fun Zoom meeting to participate in as well. But it looks like that might be the way that Thomson is, doing a buy rather than a build.
That'd be kind of unusual for them, right? I feel like Thomson and like Westlaw especially always have a reputation for sort of building things in-house, whereas like Lexis kind of acquires things like Ravel and whatnot. At least that's the conventional wisdom.
At least on the search technology side, I think that's always been the case. Thomson, of course, is just also just bought up loads of companies. It was when I worked there, it was super exciting because it was always, well, what did we buy today? Was it a news source? Was it IP? Was it so that they're no longer that any longer. It's a much slimmer organization, but it'll be super interesting to see kind of where that goes.
When it comes to the rumor, was there anything about whether they were buying Casetext with name to have it just sort of be a standalone alternative to Westlaw, sort of under the Thomson Reuters umbrella, or is the idea that they would sort of integrate that with Westlaw? I guess it's all speculation at this point, but.
I have no idea. I'd be surprised if it weren't integrated into the search product. I don't think you'd ever want. I can't imagine it wouldn't be.
Yeah, cannibalizing your own.
But the thing is, the technology is open AI, so I'm not sure. I short answer is I don't know anything. But I just don't imagine why that would need to be a purchase. Why Thomson would invest in Casetext,
right?
If the technology that's wrapped around it is just open AI anyway. So maybe they figure something out that I don't know.
Is the idea with these things is they get sort of like that API access to GPT, and then sort of use that as an interface to the search function. So it's sort of you're inputting things into GPT, it sort of pings the search functionality, returns results, feeds that back into GPT, and then like summarizes that for you. That's sort of my understanding of the way that kind of flow works. That might be simplistic. It's probably more complicated than that.
That's my understanding as well. And so in that case, what's the need for an acquisition by Thomson? Casetext? I don't get it. Casetext early on, and I was asking in the chat during last week's presentation at the Legal Roundtable. It's kind of interesting. I liked sort of their early ideas that never went anywhere. Casetext had this sort of crowdsourced citator type of service. Do you remember that? I think it was called a roadmap. Remember along the side of the text, you had like this little heat map of citations, and you could annotate the document for other attorneys. I like that crowdsource approach. It was not popular, and
Mhm.
I just kind of went away quietly. But and now and now they're first out of the gate with the open AI. So
Yeah, yeah.
different.
I'd really love to, yeah, give that a test drive some point, but yeah, haven't got a chance to yet.
Yeah, I've tested case text,
Mhm.
or I'm sorry, co-counsel on case text, and it works pretty well. I mean, yeah, but it's pricey. It's
Oh, yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
it's not something I'm going to hang on to for very long when, I have to, and as Karen and I have talked about regularly, and, trust but verify
Mhm.
paradigm is really tough to manage because you're paying extra for the service. You do the research, you get your results, and then you have to do the research all over again just to confirm that the results you got are the ones you want.
Yeah.
So there's a long way to go before that trust is actually truly a trust component. So
How accurate was it just in your sort of personal experience with it?
it was,
Co-counsel.
I thought it was excellent. I mean,
Mm.
for for especially on case law, for questions that were pretty solid, that had a solid foundation. It wasn't a batshit crazy question. Oftentimes, those are the hard ones, and you just get zero relevant results because it's just a crazy argument in the first place. And
Yeah,
that sort of creative leap is not something that the AI is capable of doing, to say this is crazy,
right.
or to say this is crazy because if it were true, then the world would fall apart, or whatever the logical next step to that statement is. It can't do that. So
Yeah.
but on the, if you asking it for what the statute of limitations are, or the elements of a claim are, or some of the basic items that there should be an answer to, it does a
Mhm.
really good job of delivering those results. I found a case I would have never found just using like the key number system.
Mhm.
It was a trial court case from Idaho, I think, federal, way outside the jurisdiction I cared about, but it
Yeah.
had that little snarky bit of, it had that text that stated sort of in the voice that we wanted to put in the memo
Mhm.
for that particular research question. So it was an excellent find, not citable authority even, but
Yeah.
the language worked, right? It's like, wow, that's exactly, you can imagine, like one court said or something. I don't know how you would actually put that into a brief, but because there's plenty of other authority in that jurisdiction, but you could certainly
Yeah.
borrow that language
Yeah.
and adopt it as your own, even, or a variation of it for.
And at the very least, at least there's one court who sort of did the thing that you were hoping
Yeah.
the court would do. I think I've had similar experiences with just case text parallel search, where like I wouldn't feel comfortable necessarily relying on that, solely if I were having to be like completely thorough and finding like every case on some topic. But if you put in a proposition that you're having trouble supporting, sometimes you do, yeah, find cases that would be really difficult to find otherwise, because
Yeah.
it uses a similar
Yeah.
sort of neural network.
I'll use parallel search just, with my regular research as an alternative strategy, because the natural language seems to work really, really well there. I mean,
Yeah.
it delivers good results, and yeah, I can do that for free even, and I can grab those citations and pull them into Westlaw, and that takes me down another path. So it works. I mean, that it works well.
So I guess, yeah, one open question I have too, kind of based on your explanation about what co-counsel is good for, is, once that becomes sort of released more, I guess, is it in wide release? Can anyone sign up for it now, or?
Oh yeah, yeah,
Okay, yeah, is, whether people will, yeah, find it valuable, like you said, the sort of use cases that you kind of outlined, like finding the statute of limitations on something, finding the elements of an action. I mean, for people who have a little bit of experience doing legal research, that's sort of low hanging fruit,
yeah,
like
yeah.
it's not difficult to find those things.
Right.
So, yeah, is it worth paying extra for it?
That's right.
You know,
Well,
like, I guess, yeah, that's, you know,
and that's it does a lot more than that as well.
okay,
That's
yeah.
how I used it for writing a legal research memo for a client, right? But there are other, you know, it ingests documentation as well, like, you know, like the brief analyzer tools that you were talking about. It does that kind of work as well, offers alternative arguments, missing cases, sort of like if you, you know, an alternative to these brief analyzer tools on Westlaw, for example.
Yeah.
Uh, and we will get to the most interesting legal research question of the week in a moment here. I've got
Sorry, yeah,
the bill up here.
gotten us off track.
But, you know, these tools are these quick check tools. And I use Westlaw, but Lexis, of course, Bloomberg have their own tools. But you know, it just ingests and reviews your document, suggests missing cases, and then the co-counsel will also, you know, recommend missing arguments and things like that. So I don't know if you saw that, you know, they did a thing on Morning Joe, the MSNBC program. I don't know how they got.
Yeah, I saw it secondhand, sort of, yeah, for the fact.
I'm like, how does that happen? Did they pay for that? I mean, is that a how do you, you know? I was curious about how I don't know anything about that end of the marketing or media environment. That's a pretty good get to show up on a national news show with your new product.
I think, you know, just generally, OpenAI, whoever does marketing for that group should get a Nobel Prize for marketing or something like that. Because the way they rolled it out was just brilliant.
Pretty nice.
Yeah. One thing that I feel like these things, you know, as librarians, I think the first thing that we want to do with these new tools is like see how they're useful for like information retrieval. But it seems like what people might be having most success with when it comes to even just like ChatGPT is just sort of using them for like summarization and just sort of like manipulating language. That's sort of like submitted to the platform. So you're sort of minimizing the role in having it like find things for you and just using it sort of for that next step of like, here are some documents, you know, synthesize it, summarize it, you know, write something based off of it, or write something like this document, but tailored to this purpose, you know, those sorts of things.
Yeah, and I think I did that yesterday on just using Bing Chat. I was I don't do nonprofit law, but I was looking into the IRS publications 557. It's like, hey, all you need to do is refer to publication 557. Well, that's a huge document. I'm like, oh, you know, I'm doing Control F. I'm like, wait a minute. So I asked, you know, my question for that document in Bing Chat and just popped up a little paragraph. I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, and it gave me the term I needed to do the Control F in the first place to find that point in the document. So that's pretty cool. I mean, that's
a time. Yeah.
To use it, right? Yeah.
It seems like a safe way to use it too.
Yeah.
Like a way that would minimize any like hallucinations or.
And trust but verify in that situation is much more efficient. It's not doing the research all over again. It gives you information to get to that point in the text that you needed. So I felt like that was a little bit more successful than the traditional. I need a case. You know, what's the statute? You know, what's the meaning of the statute, kind of thing. So. Yeah,
it's interesting. Yeah, we're all having to kind of relearn how to, well, maybe not relearn, but figure out where this thing sort of fits into the research process. And it seems like there are so many points in the process where it could be useful, but you know, where is it reliable? Where is it a little bit unreliable? It's going to be a while before the dust settles on that, I bet.
Yeah, and I think, you know, research. The way we think about research, I think, has changed over the years. Anyway, we, you know, how, you know, we run a query in a database, and I think it's kind of nice to have this new technology that actually, you know, researches a whole range of practices this, and this technology forces us to sort of rethink research in something other than just search. So I think, at least that's at least the technology is helping us wrap our brains around a new idea. Andrew,
just on our toes. Okay, but let's get to the question.
Yeah, very cool. I just wanted to get your feel on kind of what was going on in the all the academics I've talked to have just told me that that's all anyone is thinking about
It's definitely on my mind.
What's the standard going to be? What's the policy for the school going to be? And so it was eager to hear from you on that. But what we do here is we answer the most interesting legal research question of the week. I had a couple. You had some interesting ones as well, I thought. Tell us a little bit about what came your way this week.
Yeah, without getting into too much detail, we get a lot of reference questions, of course, from law faculty, and a lot of those questions involve current legislation that folks are interested in, and this question involved me just sort of trying to find the bill text for a bill that was introduced over a month ago, and I went on to Congress.gov. That would be really easy to find it through that channel, and was surprised that even though it's been a month since it was introduced, that the text of the bill wasn't actually available through that platform. And we were able to find it just sort of posted on the websites of the sponsors for the bill, but without a bill number. And I guess it probably wasn't sort of the official version. And then that was good enough, but it just made me wonder, why there was that delay. And it seemed sort of concerning to me for a few different reasons. First, if there is sort of this month-long lag between when the bill is introduced and when it's available through Congress.gov, that means that there might be a lot of publicity about the bill, because there's usually a lot of fanfare when these things get introduced. And then, folks would go onto Congress.gov or, what have you, and then not be able to find the actual text. So they're relying on sort of the news reports about the content of the bill without being able to look at the text of the bill itself. Of course, if they're diligent, they would be able to find that through the website for the congressperson. But on one hand, I don't think that someone would actually alter the language of the bill or provide something inaccurate. But I don't know. It seems like going through official channels would be a little bit more reliable. They're like most Congress people, I trust just fine, but there are a few out there that might be less.
I get that. I was wondering about what policy concerns you had, but you want to be able to independently verify what the press is saying about if you just listen to the news, it's often just crazy, very bad summarization of what the bill text actually is and what it says. So you want that to be able just to independently verify what it says, whether you're a citizen or any other, a professional or any other citizen. I think you'd want to have that. The thing I always want to know is who drafted the thing in the first place, right? Industry groups too is where did this language originally come from? And as you say, you see that you can find the text in many locations. Sometimes at the industry groups who care about that text.
Yep.
But for the same reason, are all of these good ideas necessarily sourced from the minds of the sponsors who bring them? Of course, they're not. They're, but you'd love to know a little bit more about, because you often hear about, it was entirely drafted without any amendment or critical thought by the legislature. Or Congress, it's just adopted whole cloth from the industry groups. Those are the kinds of things that I'd love to know, a little bit more about. I don't think there's any, strategy for for knowing that other than investigative journalism. I don't know.
No, yeah, that's a good point. I mean, in this case, a lot of the press releases that I was able to find did come from sort of nonprofit organizations and lobbyist groups and stuff like that. So you could kind of guess at who was involved in drafting some of the language of the bill. But yeah, it would be interesting if they created some way to sort of formalize that or make it sort of a requirement. I'm not sure what that would look like, but yeah, it'd be interesting if organizations had to be listed as not like sponsors, but some like original drafter. I don't know, something like that.
Yeah, it would be, I'd love to see the markup after it came from the industry trade group or something, but
yeah, that's that sort of legislative history that is a little bit behind the scenes, I guess. I remember researching another bill that was sort of it was clearly something that was drafted by like a lobbying organization, because it was a state level bill that had been introduced in multiple states in identical form. And so it wasn't any mystery sort of who was involved and where it came from.
Yeah.
But from a legislative history perspective, it was a little difficult because in most of the states, it seemed like it just sort of sailed through the committee without a lot of substantive discussion or any changes. It just sort of was introduced and passed. You imagine that a lot of the sort of what we think of as like committee material, like the reports and the markup and the amendments and changes happened before the bill was even introduced, but probably behind closed doors. And the only thing we were able to find were news reports, and it wasn't like anyone was trying to pull a fast one or anything. It's just the information wasn't available.
And I think there are trusted sources out there too. I mean, the trade groups or public interest groups, I think often those are excellent resources. I rely on those quite a bit. I understand they're biased, and it's you have to have your thinking hat on as you're reviewing their materials, but they're good resources for at least even addressing concerns I would not have thought of about the text of a bill. Was I noticed when I jump into congress.gov, when you grab the text tab here, you've got we're working on it language at the bottom here. This is teeny weeny on the screen here. I apologize, but it's just saying it can take some time for that information to get to the publishing office printed. Odd way of putting it. I also just did a quick search in the congressional bill text database in Westlaw. Didn't find anything in more recent there. But obviously it's just coming from that source anyway. But I thought maybe they have another line on that text, but I didn't find it in the congressional bill text database either on Westlaw.
That was my experience, exactly. Of course, you want to be thorough. So even though you suspect that Westlaw is pulling it just directly from the GPO, you never know. So you kind of log in and search, but I didn't find it there. I tried like govtrack.us. I tried ProQuest Congressional too, because sometimes they do.
You guys have ProQuest Congressional at the library?
We do, yeah. Actually, the public can use that if they come in.
Really?
There are terminals on campus, and we have campus-wide access to that too. So you don't have to be affiliated with the law library. But that's a great resource. We use that to teach legislative history usually, because it's so thorough, and the way that it lays out like the compiled histories for bills. Is really helpful from sort of a teaching perspective, because it categorizes all the sources by type. And
that's good to know. I was wondering who had access to that. I don't think Karen's library, the Hennepin County Law Library, has access to it. The Hennepin County Library, so we're in Minnesota here, so Hennepin County is where we're situated here in Minneapolis. and the ProQuest database at the Hennepin County Library, not the law library, just the county library, just ProQuest. It's not ProQuest Congressional. So I was recently wondering, I think we chatted about this even recently, about where that might be. I didn't know that the university had it. So that's, I don't know, that's exciting for me.
Yeah, I think it's pretty common for academic law libraries to subscribe to that.
Do they?
It's really, invaluable when you're doing like really in-depth legislative history research. Use it all the time.
Is there a comparable resource for state legislative material? Like
That's a good question. I don't know that off the top of my head. I think there are some sources. I don't think they're necessarily comparable in terms of their comprehensiveness.
Yeah.
I mean, ProQuest goes just like all the way back, and it's as pretty much as comprehensive as you can get. That's my understanding. With states, I mean, things vary so much from state to state.
Yeah.
But I feel like I have heard of some sources that try to compile that a little bit in a way that's a little bit more searchable. But yeah, I should know that, but I don't know that off the top of my head.
Yeah, I know that well, both Lexis and I'm not sure what Bloomberg has, but and I'm forgetting the name of the resource, just blanking on it. But the legislative historical materials both rely on a resource called, can't remember it, totally blanking on it. You probably know it off the, I can't remember. It is, I keep want to say TransUnion, but that's the wrong word. There's a resource that I can't remember. It's going to kill me for at any rate. If I remember it, if I can dig it up, I'll put it in the show notes and
Okay.
maybe. So yeah, but yeah, I thought that was an interesting question, and I'm excited to know that ProQuest is available at the library.
I actually had a related one too, that kind of touched on the same issue where I was looking for a hearing, and that was one where I was able to find sort of an unofficial transcript. Well, I guess I don't know what the status of it would be. It's actually seemed pretty official. It's from the committee's actual website, but it was from at least a year ago, and that committee hadn't gotten around, it seemed like, to actually publishing their hearings in sort of the official format. And that was another thing where when you go on the GovInfo, there's a note saying that it usually takes like a few months to a year to publish hearings. But at this point, it was like from the last Congress, the last congressional session. So
and it still wasn't there.
Yeah, so I wonder if there's just sort of a backlog for whatever reason. But yeah.
We'll have to get our DC librarians in on this, maybe.
Yeah. See what the story is.
Yeah. It's in paper somewhere. It's some handwritten notes on someone's desk, maybe. I don't know. Did another interesting one too from I was curious to know, I didn't get the full story, but we were talking about the struggle of teaching business practice versus business law. And I was curious to know what the source of that, if you could talk about it, what the source of that tension was.
Yeah, again, I don't want to get into too many details, but this is kind of a recurring question that we get at the reference desk is, folks, especially summer associates, working on something kind of real life, and they want to find cases that say something incredibly specific about sort of a transactional matter. And it's frustrating because there's so much case law out there. So you'd think like there has to be a case on any topic. But it seems like, especially when we're talking about just sort of industry best practices, sometimes that isn't really encapsulated case. Like you don't really find
Yeah.
a case saying like, this is the way these contracts should be. Usually the cases are like about a contract that went bad, and you wouldn't want to use that as an example for kind of drafting your own.
Right.
And so, that research is really important, but and a necessary part of the process, because that's the primary law, and that's what students, I think, tend to gravitate towards, because when we teach research, so much of the emphasis is on finding case law because of how important it is. But in those situations, I feel like a lot, what might be more helpful are, sort of transactional precedents, examples of contracts that people have done in certain industries to show that there's sort of a commonly accepted practice, even if that doesn't like get reflected directly in the case law. So, in the 1L LRW program, we don't really talk about transactional research at all. But I'm wondering if that might be something that I might want to change. And even in the upper division research class I teach, we do like one session out of 13 on sort of transactional resources. And there, like, I usually just focus on like transactional resources as drafting aids, and less about sort of using transactional precedents the way that you might do case law research.
And I think that's, I do feel like, some capacity to assess business risk. A lot of your students, a lot of students are not always going to be litigators.
Right. Yeah.
And the value of case law is pretty limited. I think. I mean, what you really need to do is be able to assess the risk. Which was always frustrating for me when I came into practice, was to look at an agreement and think of it as kind of a mess. But the value of the transaction, what are we going to do? Or what do you want to do with this? We're going to redraft it. Are we going to, to what extent for this $3,000 are we going to, spend time negotiating? If it's a higher value, it's a different story, right? Or even if it's a higher value, how do we assess the risk in adding on legal work to that transaction? There's certainly value in the work, but it's just hard to, I think, for law students who only recognize risk to evaluate risk. Right? What happens if it could be terrible? Not a balancing of the economic scales, I think
I see.
Super valuable for attorneys to do.
Yeah. So you're saying that maybe the way we train law students, their default is to sort of think in like, should we do this or should we not? Sort of an A or B type thing, where in like reality, the question is like, given that there's probably only like a 5% chance that this would be an issue, like, is it worth kind of pursuing or asking for more money or less money, kind of in negotiating about that small amount of risk? Like, at what point does it become risky enough that we actually want to make an issue out of it? That's where
is there an insurance clause? Right?
How
are we covered? What do we know about insurance and the coverage? How does that figure in? The trustworthiness of the other party, which is, of course, crazy talk if you're an attorney, right? What is your past relationship with this party, and what are the long-term prospects of dealing with that party in the future? Is it worth a higher level of risk because of other transactions? There's just so many other considerations that the law, whatever that means, just doesn't account for. And it's, I have the reverse situation where, there's a ton of things in contract. A ton of contracts are just horrible, right? If you ever read, do you follow Ken Adams? Do you follow his blog?
No, but I should.
He for folks, I think most of our listeners probably know Ken Adams' contract drafting and his manual, and But he often talks about how the existing practice is just pretty terrible anyway. And we do a lot of here we do a lot of coding of documents for automation, and folks still use, despite the risk of building an ambiguity into the contract, they'll spell the words out, or they'll spell the number out, and then in parentheses also include the number expressed in numerals. Just horrible practice.
Right.
And none of the tools that have an automatic, you'd think there'd be a tool that just translated that for you. My developer built a little Python script that did translate it for you, but none of the tools, Woodpecker, Afterpattern, Lawya, none of them do that for you. And I remember we asked, I think the folks at Afterpattern, would you do that? And they're like, no, because that's horrible drafting practice. I mean, the whole community of folks who were using that product, like, that's just a bad idea. We don't want to encourage that as a thing. And yet, I see that in a ton of our templates. And when you ask the attorney, they'll say, my client wants it. To them, that looks like an official, there must be a reason for it, and I've done that. I've had that experience where I've taken it out, for my clients, and they're like, nope, put it back in there. That's like, but there's no reason for it, right? This is bad practice. Nope.
So I didn't consider that. So you're saying that, sometimes that seems like sort of like pseudo legalese,
Yeah.
And I didn't consider that maybe like sometimes a client would insist on inserting like some pseudo legalese into a contract,
right?
Even though you're like, that's not necessary, it's a bad idea. You're like, no, but it looks more like a contract this way.
Yeah, and that's
weird.
Right justifying the right justification on your document. People just love the way that looks. That's like, but it's not readable. It's so hard to read. It's yeah. So I mean, the business practice is often awful, goofy, legal, not good practice either.
Yeah. So when you said that language shows up in templates, do you mean like sort of internal templates? I imagine they're not like in like practical law, like forms and those sorts of things.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Most of the work we do is the work product of the law firm. So marital settlement agreement, or although, the uniform conveyancing blanks here in Minnesota, the reason we built our script was that the conveyancing blanks in Minnesota use that convention.
Oh, okay.
Numerals spelled out, numerals, we always get the terminology mixed up. The numbers spelled out is in text, and the numbers also expressed in numerals, both. The UCBs in Minnesota adopt that, so we had to build a little script for that when we were automating those. But
interesting.
Yeah, not good practice. I don't think. But yeah, I would love it. I think we got an earlier recording with Allison Carroll, who does and we talk about this all the time, the Delta model of lawyer competency, where attorneys need to have both some competency, not only in the law, but also in how they relate to people and how they practice their business and participate in the business of their clients.
Yeah, there's definitely a big,
super, that ability to assess risk and let some things go, or understand why help the client be able to understand the reasonableness of the risk. But
there's a big push towards developing those skills in law school. That's not an emphasis of the research classes that I teach. A lot of it is, based on finding the law. I think that's, we have like we have a big like law and practice program that the Warnells go through. So they go through LRW, but then also law and practice, and then their experiential learning requirements, where students are getting experience in the clinics, and negotiation classes that have simulations and things like that. But I should think about ways to sort of work in sort of the client experience a little bit more into the problems that I'm writing up for them.
I mean, I have the extreme privilege of having a developer who works with me who got his advanced degree from St. Thomas. So, if I need to do a data visualization, I have him to, correct my assumptions or, but obviously not something I got in law school, but it's super valuable. I mean, for me to be able to deliver that to a client, especially where it's kind of where I'm short on knowledge, it's, but yeah, it's a good luck for me to have to share an office.
Yeah.
Andrew, we are at 8:40.
Oh, wow, that went by fast.
Yeah. You got anything interesting coming up in your weekend or next week that you want to promote or share with the audience?
Not too much. Yeah, it's the summer, so things are a little quieter on campus. It's a good opportunity to start getting ready for the next semester. So, a lot of what I'm thinking about is, as you probably guessed, how to integrate generative AI into next semester syllabus, which is still a moving target because, we might have access to Lexis AI, but it sounds like the students won't quite yet. So I'm trying to figure out how to kind of navigate that. I'm working on a few different things with a colleague of mine who is the FCIL librarian here, Lauren Turner, also about generative AI. And we're trying to look into how it sort of utilizes secondary sources that might have been sort of swept up in its training data. But that's still super early stages. But
yeah, interesting. Interesting.
Yeah,
I think we were there when we heard Damian Reel say secondary sources are over.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I hope not. We'll see. But the interesting thing is, a lot of what ChatGPT is built off of are secondary sources.
Right.
So then, if you get rid of the secondary sources going forward, does the model become like static? Like, how does that work? So I guess if you tie it into a database like Lexis, then it does have access to the secondary sources. But again, if they stop making them, then it seems like that would impact the utility of the model going forward.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Those, yeah.
Or the secondary source material becomes more business practice, real world application, blog posts. I don't know what less. Maybe it's resolving this problem we were just talking about of misapplying or our inability to assess risk and apply the business practice to the.
Yeah. So less academic treatises, more sort of like the practical law, practical guidance, or part of those databases. No, I mean, I could see that being a potential future.
I hadn't thought about that. What is the these know-how resources are really cool. Those are those are, I hadn't thought about those as going away as a result of this. Having those real live people give us that information that is super valuable. Maybe it just generates more of that. I don't know.
But I deep down, I still believe that, I don't think treatises are going away. I really like the way that, they take an entire, pretty broad subject area and then just organize it for you, in a way that makes sense. It's that level of browsability that I don't see that present in the current generative AI offerings. They're like the least browsable source you can imagine. They answer very targeted questions, but they don't let you see sort of the edges of the issue, the way that a treatise gives you that sort of high level view.
Reminds me of Matthew's annotated patent digest.
Yes,
I've been in here.
I was just using that this week.
Oh, were you? You were in here?
Yeah.
Let's see where are my table of contents here? It's still loading. There's a chapter in this treatise that analyzes texts which have interpreted specific words. My memory is that it's chapter 4. We'll see if I can remember that. Ordinary meaning and claim construction.
Claim construction, yeah.
But you can't search for the word a or the in most databases. So this author is just reviewing every patent case, and if it's dealing with claim construction, even if the case is about the meaning of simple words, you'll get it. And I don't know to what extent that, how even does an AI find that kind of material? Find me a case that has interpreted the word a as a matter of or the article a or whatever it might be. Let's see. Here we go. Sub 5 of paragraph 4. Here it is, all along and cases that's super valuable. And this is just a human being looking at every case, reading it. And case, they're not there's a lot of case law out there, but it's not big data, right? It's not just a ton of stuff. Why not read every case so it's super valuable treatise just by having somebody's eyeballs on it. I don't know that you do better with AI or a search or whatever.
And the amount of confidence I'd have would be much greater if I were able to go to a treatise like this, written by an expert, and then be confident that these might be like pretty much all of the cases involving like the definition of Van/Short versus like here are like 2 or 3 of them, which I feel like maybe a generative AI sort of search would be able to do, but the level of thoroughness, being able to see the edges of what you're actually looking for. Of course, it's speculation on my part at this point, since I haven't actually used like Lexis AI or CoCounsel, but I'd be surprised if it was able to be as thorough as that. And then we've all been in that situation too, where we think we need to research one issue, then we go into the treatise, browse around the table of contents, and then we're like, oh, it's actually this one right next to it.
Exactly right. Yeah, often we used to say it's not the book in the library you're looking for; it's the book next to the book.
Exactly. That still happens all the time. So, that sort of serendipity that you get with browsable sources. I feel like generative AI might not be able to replace that. It will probably supplement that. It's sort of like another form of serendipity, where you're kind of leveraging this mysterious sort of intelligence to see what it can kind of spit back at you. But I don't see browsable sources going away.
That's a good point. There is some math there that I just don't understand with respect to your point on serendipity or finding the book next to the book. The strength of weak ties. It's the same problem with social media, is that why is it siloing information rather than introducing us to new information? It's something I just don't fundamentally understand, is why the algorithm, whether it's black box legal research tool AI, why is that giving us only targeted information and not the, why is it, maybe it is, why is it not allowing us to benefit from the strength of weak ties, or however you describe that related information, that new idea? Why isn't it triggering that new thing that you get with the physical presence by stepping into the library, right? Or are we just not is it doing that and we're just not recognizing it? Or I don't know.
Maybe the algorithms, they might leverage historical behavior too much, place too much of an emphasis on sort of where you've already been to kind of predict where you want to go. That could be part of it. But the nice thing about libraries, you walk in and It doesn't know who you are or what you've looked at in the past, and you're just confronted by rows and rows of books by experts whose expertise you have to kind of put some trust in.
If I jump on, I've deleted TikTok from my phone a number of
Oh,
times. It asks you, who are you? Straight middle-aged white dude from the rural Midwest. I don't like the videos.
yeah,
The assumptions, right? It's
Yeah.
like gross.
Yeah.
And I'm not a woodworker, and all of these young women are too young. All right. I mean, it's gross.
But then
And,
eventually, when it does get to know you, then that's creepy in its own
right.
way.
Yeah, I mean, you have to like the content or
Right.
whatever. I mean, and it learns probably effectively, but still, how do you grow beyond that? It's like, hey, maybe here's some DEI video or something.
Right.
Here's how does it identify? How does it address a social concern, or should it?
But then once you do get in that area that you're interested in, then you run into that other issue where then you end up kind of siloed in sort of this an information bubble.
Yeah. And we want oftentimes, especially with those crazy arguments, we want it to make that leap to actually what you should be thinking about is this. It's that book next to the book in the library. It should be able to make that leap to a thing that gets you that additional piece of information that is relevant, even if you don't recognize it immediately as relevant. It should offer that. Talking a little bit out of school here for me, we'll bring Damien back for some of these conversations, I think. And we're back talking about the AI tools. It's hard to escape.
Everything goes back to GPT.
Well, Andrew, it was great chatting with you. Thank you so much.
You too,
You're welcome to join us anytime. All our librarian friends are welcome to join us for this Zoom conversation every Friday morning. We log in about 7:45 every morning, and we try to wrap up before 9 at any rate. So send us your challenging research questions. We'll address them here and test some queries if we need to. But thank you, Andrew, for jumping in. And
thanks for the invite. It was a fun conversation.
Take care.
You too.
Bye-bye.